When you're looking at these companies, I think that was really good, for any startups that are listening and, seeing if Halliburton Labs is maybe a fit for them. What I find interesting though is, you guys, I think you see a lot of incubators and accelerators. They're thriving in doing this remote just because of, the conditions that we've had with quarantine and COVID. Like, it's really pushed everyone to this digital model. Whereas you guys, any startup that you're working with, the whole value proposition is like, look, we got physical lab space that you can be working in. So are you guys bullish on the idea that a lot of these companies that you find are going to be Houston based? Or are you searching for companies, all over the US, all over the world, and hoping that they'll come into Houston, move operations here for a opportunity to work with Halliburton Labs?
Yeah, we cast our net pretty broadly. I'm having conversations with the Israeli ecosystem, the New Zealand, Brazil, Canada, the UK.
Yeah.
Halliburton's a global company. And so we've got a footprint in lots of different places around the world. Our beachhead is certainly here in Houston for Halliburton Labs. It really is our starting point. But what I found in those conversations and talking to startups that are in lots of different countries that are solving energy problems, they know they need to get to Houston at some point.
That's interesting.
It's on their radar. And what that means is they're looking for low friction ways to get a footprint in Houston.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's something that I think is compelling in terms of kind of what Halliburton Labs might be able to offer is if they're ready to, and that also doesn't have to be a different country. I was having a conversation with a group out of MIT, and they're thinking about the same thing. They've got a few more things they've got to solve, but then they're going to be ready to pack up, and they know they need to get to Houston. Their target customer base is here. And so it's
really interesting to hear that. And, you and I have spent a lot of time talking about the ecosystem, the tech ecosystem in Houston, and, not to beat a dead horse, but we've talked about this several times on the show, but I just think Houston is a very special place with some of the smartest people in the world. You have the technical talent. You have, just like you said, you have startups saying we need to get to Houston. That's where our client base is. And, we talk about the ecosystem that's being built, digital wildcatters here, highlighting startups and, being a connector, Halliburton Labs, you're starting to see, I would say, very solid pieces of the puzzle, coming together and putting together this ecosystem. Give us your thoughts on Houston's tech ecosystem, the future moving forward. It sounds like from some of the conversations you're having, these startups around the nation, around the world are saying, yeah, we need to get to Houston at some point. Are you bullish on Houston tech ecosystem over the next 10 or 15 years?
For sure. I think Houston is a sleeping giant. I think that there is a ton of the ingredients here within striking distance of the city to really have that impact. So it's really just a matter of, are we able to kind of bring those resources to bear and sort of demonstrate that? And I think we're seeing that and feeling that. There's I actually heard it termed today, kind of venture capital 3.0 is starting to take shape now, and I think sort of catalyzed by COVID and what that looks like. And an interesting component of that is the involvement of corporations in kind of a unique way. And that's where I think the timing of Halliburton Labs is right in the sense that the kinds of problems that need to be solved in energy are not easy problems. And it requires a depth of technical understanding and knowledge and applying that at scale. And those are sort of capabilities that we have. I think about sort of startup communities generally. There's a lot of talk about the creative class more broadly and how that gets brought in sort of an appropriately dense manner to kind of create this innovation environment. And I think certainly one of the underappreciated components of the creative class is engineering. And every engineering discipline and really science discipline is found here in the right amount in the Houston area. And so the access to that talent is real. And I think certainly one of Houston's challenges is just its dispersion in terms of just where it's physically located.
That's such a huge problem that people outside of Houston, maybe even people in Houston, if you're not actively involved with the startup scene, don't understand, is that Houston is so big, geographically speaking, that it's actually a barrier that, there's not a central location. And it's impossible to have a central location, because where's the central location? If you're up in the Woodlands, your central location of, Houston is different than mine out in Katy, right? Like if I'm in Katy, I like driving out to city center. I don't like, driving out to downtown where,
exactly.
Where my office is currently, and I hate driving to downtown. So it really actually becomes that provides, or not provides, but it makes some barriers to really getting this ecosystem thriving.
Kind of a bit of a bigger hurdle to over. You've got a sort of a achieving critical mass is going to look and feel different because of that dispersion problem. And I think that's what's encouraging what's happening. I think there was a statistic that was shared with me that in 2015, there were 5 startup development organizations in and around the Houston area.
Yeah.
And that Halliburton Labs was the 38th.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think Houston Exponential told us that there's 35 plus now in Houston.
And that when you look at sort of where they're located around the city, there really is kind of this constellation of support network around, and I think that's important. And I think there's some conversations about Halliburton Labs being located on the north part of town up by Bush Airport. Well, we're the only startup development organization within a meaningful radius in that space, and really that's one of the things that I think Houston is going to have to kind of sort out and work through, is that there's going to be these great kind of anchor stores around the city. But the potential is unbelievable. I think that there's certainly is not only Houston on sort of the radar of the startup community more broadly, particularly those focused on energy, which is the focus of our chat. But, let's not forget that there's medical and space tech, and there's a lot of other things that are sort of out there that are a draw to Houston. But the venture capital community is thinking in the same way. And so I think we really are sort of right at kind of the cusp of the next 5 years is going to be really fascinating to see where the city of Houston goes. And I think that there's a lot of the right components there, a lot of the right discussion and solving for the right things. And so I'm just thrilled to be in the middle of it and playing a role.
It's exciting. I've had several conversations with VCs, founders, and, talk about the future of energy tech and the future of Houston. And I think if you start looking out, 15, 20 years from now, it's going to look completely different. And we're going to remember these days, as the early days where there were handful of us building things to support the ecosystem.